The camera's red light blinked in the dark, a silent betrayer in Ethan Caldwell's bedroom. His father, billionaire tech mogul Victor Caldwell, thought he could control everything: his empire, his legacy, even his son's heart. But what he saw through that lens would unravel his world in ways he never imagined. Ethan stood by his window, the New York skyline sprawling below like a glittering promise. At 23, he carried the weight of his father's expectations: perfect grades, perfect manners, perfect heir to a fortune built on surveillance tech. But tonight, his heart raced for a different reason. He glanced at his phone, rereading the text, "Meet me at the usual spot. I can't wait to see you." A smile broke across his face, but it faltered as he sensed the camera's gaze, hidden in the corner of his room. Had he missed something? Was his secret no longer safe? Victor Caldwell sat in his sterile office, staring at the live feed on his monitor. He'd installed the camera to protect Ethan, or so he told himself: protection from scandal, from weakness, from anything that could tarnish the Caldwell name. Ethan's late-night disappearances had raised suspicions, and Victor wasn't a man who tolerated unknowns. The screen flickered, showing Ethan slipping on a jacket and leaving his room. Victor leaned closer, his jaw tight. "Where are you going, son?" he muttered, unaware that the answer would shake his carefully constructed world. Ethan hurried through the chilly Manhattan streets, his breath visible in the autumn air. He pulled his scarf tighter, his steps quickening toward a small, dimly lit cafe in the village. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and cinnamon. And there, in a corner booth, sat Lucas Harper. Lucas, with his soft blonde curls and warm hazel eyes, looked up and grinned, a smile that made Ethan's heart ache with something too big for words. They'd met 6 months ago at a charity gala Victor forced Ethan to attend, where Lucas, a volunteer artist, had been sketching portraits for donors. One glance, one conversation, and Ethan was lost. "Missed you," Lucas whispered as Ethan slid into the booth, their knees brushing under the table. Ethan wanted to reach for his hand, but hesitated, glancing around. The cafe was safe, a haven for people like them, but the weight of his father's world still pressed on him. "You okay?" Lucas asked, his voice gentle but searching. Ethan nodded, but the lie felt heavy. How could he explain the camera, the constant scrutiny, the fear that his father would destroy the one thing that made him feel alive? Back in his office, Victor's eyes narrowed at the grainy footage. Ethan hadn't returned home, and the tracker in his phone, a feature of Caldwell Tech's latest software, pinged at an address Victor didn't recognize. He opened a new tab, pulling up the cafe's details. A known hangout for those kinds of people, the reviews sneered. Victor's fist clenched. He'd raised Ethan to be better than this, hadn't he? To uphold the family legacy, not to chase reckless desires. He dialed his security chief. "Find out who he's with. Now." Ethan and Lucas lingered in the cafe, their conversation a quiet dance of dreams and fears. Lucas spoke of his art, of wanting to paint the world's raw beauty, while Ethan confessed his longing to break free from his father's empire. "He thinks he owns me," Ethan said, his voice low. "But when I'm with you, I feel like I could be someone else. Someone real." Lucas reached across the table, his fingers brushing Ethan's. "You are real," he said, "and I see you." Their moment shattered when Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Come home." "Dad." Ethan's stomach dropped. Had Victor seen them? Did he know? Lucas noticed the shift in Ethan's face and squeezed his hand. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together," he said. But as Ethan left the cafe, the city's lights felt colder, the camera's red blink echoing in his mind. Victor waited in the penthouse, the feed still playing on his laptop. He'd seen enough. Ethan smile. The way he leaned toward that boy. The intimacy that Victor couldn't unsee. Anger warred with something deeper. Something he refused to name. He'd built an empire on control. But this was beyond his grasp. When Ethan walked in, their eyes met, and the air crackled with unspoken truths. "What did you see?" Ethan asked, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. Victor's silence was answer enough. The camera had captured everything: Ethan's heart, his rebellion, his love. And now, Victor faced a choice: destroy his son's happiness or confront the limits of his own power. The penthouse was a cage of glass and steel, its silence heavier than any shout. Ethan stood before his father, Victor, whose face was a mask of cold calculation. The camera's betrayal hung between them, a truth neither could ignore. "Why?" Ethan's voice broke the quiet, sharp and raw. "Why would you spy on me?" He wanted to scream, to tear down the walls of this pristine prison. But he held still, waiting for an answer. Victor's eyes flicked to the laptop. The frozen image of Ethan and Lucas in the cafe still glowing on the screen. "I was protecting you," Victor said, his tone clipped. "From yourself. From mistakes." Ethan's laugh was bitter. "Mistakes? You mean Lucas? You mean who I am?" He stepped closer, his fists clenched. "You don't get to control that, Dad." Victor's jaw tightened, but Ethan saw something flicker in his eyes: doubt. Maybe. Or fear. It was gone in an instant, replaced by the steel of a man who'd built an empire on unyielding will. "You're a Caldwell," Victor said. "You have responsibilities. This phase won't help you lead." The word phase cut deeper than Ethan expected. He'd spent years hiding, pretending, trying to fit the mold of the perfect son. But Lucas had changed that, had shown him a world where he didn't have to hide. "It's not a phase," Ethan said, his voice steady now. "It's who I am. And if you can't accept that, you're the one failing, not me." Victor stood, towering over Ethan, his presence as commanding as ever. "You think you can throw away everything I've built for you? For some artist who'll drag you into scandal?" Ethan flinched but held his ground. "Lucas isn't a scandal. He's the only thing that makes this life bearable." The words hung in the air, a challenge Victor wasn't prepared for. He turned away, staring out at the city he'd conquered, and Ethan wondered if his father saw anything beyond his own reflection. The next morning, Ethan woke to a text from Lucas. "Meet me at the park. I need to see you." Central Park was their sanctuary, a place where the city's noise faded and they could just be. Lucas was waiting by the Bethesda fountain, sketching in a worn notebook. His smile faltered when he saw Ethan's face. "What happened?" he asked, setting the notebook aside. Ethan told him everything: the camera, the confrontation, the suffocating weight of his father's expectations. Lucas listened, his hand resting lightly on Ethan's arm, grounding him. "My parents kicked me out when I came out," Lucas said quietly, his eyes distant. "I was 16. I thought I'd lost everything, but I found my art, my community." "You don't have to lose yourself to him, Ethan." The words were a lifeline, but they also terrified him. Defying Victor meant risking everything: his inheritance, his future, his place in the world. Yet as Lucas's hand tightened on his, Ethan felt a spark of courage. "I don't want to hide anymore," he said, "but I don't know how to fight him." Lucas's eyes softened. "You don't fight alone." They sat there, the fountain's spray catching the sunlight, and Ethan felt a fragile hope take root. But that hope was tested when his phone buzzed again, a message from Victor's assistant. "Meeting at the office. 2 p.m. Be there." Ethan's stomach twisted. Victor never summoned him lightly. At Caldwell Tech's headquarters, a sleek skyscraper piercing the Manhattan sky, Ethan faced his father again. Victor wasn't alone. His board of advisors sat around a polished table, their faces unreadable. "We've been discussing your future," Victor said, his voice devoid of warmth. "And the company's image." Ethan's heart sank. This wasn't just about him, it was about the Caldwell brand, a machine that devoured anything in its way. Victor slid a folder across the table. "A contract," he said. "Sign it, and we'll handle this discreetly. Refuse, and you're on your own." Ethan opened the folder, his hands trembling. The document outlined a plan, a public relationship with a woman chosen by the company, a staged engagement, a life scripted to preserve the Caldwell legacy. In exchange, Ethan would keep his inheritance, his status, his place at his father's side. He looked up, meeting Victor's gaze. "You're asking me to lie, to erase who I am." Victor's expression didn't waver. "I'm asking you to protect our family." The room felt suffocating, the advisor's eyes like daggers. Ethan thought of Lucas, of the cafe, of the freedom he'd tasted in those stolen moments. He pushed the folder back. "No," he said, the word a quiet rebellion. Victor's face darkened, but before he could speak, Ethan stood and walked out, the door's click echoing like a gunshot. Ethan's footsteps echoed in the empty corridor of Caldwell Tech, each one a step away from the life his father had planned. The city outside buzzed with possibility, but inside, Ethan felt the weight of his choice. He'd said no to Victor, but what now? He pulled out his phone, texting Lucas, "I walked out. Can I see you?" The reply was instant, "My place. Come now." Lucas's apartment in Brooklyn was a stark contrast to the Caldwell penthouse mall, cluttered with canvases and paint tubes, but alive with warmth. Lucas opened the door, pulling Ethan into a hug before he could speak. "You're shaking," Lucas said, his voice soft. Ethan sank onto the couch, the story spilling out: the contract, the board, the ultimatum. Lucas listened, his face a mix of anger and pride. "You stood up to him," he said. "That's huge, Ethan." "But what if I lose everything?" Ethan's voice cracked. "The money, the name, my future, it's all tied to him." Lucas sat beside him, their shoulders touching. "You're more than his money. You're you. And you've got me." Ethan looked at him, the fear in his chest easing just enough to breathe. Lucas's apartment, with its cracked walls and vibrant paintings, felt more like home than the penthouse ever had. Meanwhile, Victor sat in his office, the rejected contract still on the table. He'd underestimated Ethan, assumed his son would bend under pressure. Now, the board was whispering about instability, about optics, about replacing Ethan as heir. Victor's empire was built on control, but Ethan's defiance was a crack in its foundation. He opened his laptop, pulling up the camera feed again, but the screen was dark. Ethan had found the camera and disabled it. Victor's hands clenched. He needed a new plan. Ethan spent the night at Lucas's, the first time he'd stayed away from the penthouse without permission. They talked until dawn, sharing stories of fear and hope. Lucas spoke of his childhood in Ohio, of finding solace in art after his family's rejection. Ethan confessed his own loneliness, the years spent performing for a father who saw him as an asset, not a son. As the sun rose, Lucas kissed him, a quiet promise that they'd face whatever came next together. But the world outside wasn't kind. Paparazzi, tipped off by an anonymous source, caught Ethan leaving Lucas's apartment. By noon, grainy photos hit the tabloids, headlines screaming about the Caldwell heir's secret romance. Victor's phone lit up with calls from investors, PR teams, and board members. He stared at the headlines, his anger giving way to a colder resolve. If Ethan wouldn't play by his rules, Victor would force his hand. Ethan and Lucas saw the news at a diner, their coffee growing cold as they scrolled through the articles. "They know," Ethan whispered, his face pale. Lucas reached for his hand. "Let them talk. We're not hiding anymore." But Ethan's phone buzzed with a new message from Victor. "Meet me tonight. We're not done." The words felt like a trap, but Ethan knew he couldn't run forever. That evening, Victor waited in a private dining room at one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. Ethan arrived alone, his heart pounding. Victor gestured to a chair, his expression unreadable. "You've made a mess," he said, "but I'm giving you one last chance. End this, publicly, and I'll clean it up. The company, the family, it can all be yours." Ethan looked at his father, the man who'd shaped his world, and saw a stranger. "And if I don't?" he asked. Victor's smile was thin. "Then you're no longer my son." The words hit like a blow, but Ethan didn't flinch. He thought of Lucas, of the life they could build, of the freedom he'd tasted. "Then I guess I'm not," he said, standing. As he walked out, the city lights seemed brighter, sharper, like a world remade. But Victor wasn't done. In his office, he opened a file labeled Harper. Lucas. If Ethan wouldn't bend, Victor would break the one thing holding him together. The city's pulse thrummed through Ethan as he left the restaurant, Victor's ultimatum echoing in his mind. He'd walked away from his father, from the Caldwell legacy, but the cost was sinking in. His phone buzzed with notifications, more tabloid stories, more speculation about his scandalous affair. He silenced it and headed to Lucas's apartment, needing the one person who made sense in this chaos. Lucas was painting when Ethan arrived, his hands streaked with blue and gold. "You okay?" he asked, setting his brush down. Ethan shook his head, the weight of the night spilling out Victor's offer, the disownment, the fear of a future unmoored. Lucas pulled him close, his touch steadying. "You chose yourself," he said. "That's not nothing." Ethan wanted to believe him, but the headlines, the cameras, the world closing in it felt like a storm they couldn't outrun. Victor, meanwhile, was already moving pieces on his chessboard. The file on Lucas was thorough: bank records, family history, even old police reports from his teenage years. Victor's security team had dug deep, and what they found gave him leverage. Lucas wasn't just an artist. He was a liability, a kid from a broken home with debts and a past Victor could exploit. He called his lawyer. "Draft a restraining order," he said. "Make it look like Ethan's safety is at risk, and leak it to the press." By morning, the story broke. Caldwell heirs lover a threat. The article painted Lucas as unstable, a drifter with a history of trouble. Ethan saw it first, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth. Lucas, reading over his shoulder, went still. "This is him, isn't it?" Lucas said, his voice tight. "Your father?" Ethan nodded, anger burning through his shock. Victor wasn't just fighting him, was targeting Lucas, tearing at the one thing Ethan refused to lose. They sat in Lucas's tiny kitchen, strategizing. "We need to fight back," Lucas said, his eyes fierce. "He's playing dirty, but we're not helpless." Ethan hesitated. Fighting Victor meant war, legal battles, public scrutiny, maybe losing everything. But Lucas's hand found his, and the warmth reminded him why he'd walked away. "What do we do?" Ethan asked. Lucas grinned, a spark of defiance in his eyes. "We tell our story. On our terms." They spent the day planning. Lucas knew an independent journalist, Mia, who'd built a following exposing corporate overreach. She agreed to meet them at a quiet bookstore in the East Village. Mia listened as Ethan recounted the camera, the contract, Victor's threats, Lucas added his own story, his past, his struggles, the love that had pulled him through. Mia's recorder caught every word, her eyes sharp with interest. "This could be big," she said. "But it's risky. Victor's got power. You sure you're ready?" Ethan glanced at Lucas, who nodded. "We're ready," Ethan said. As they left the bookstore, hand in hand, Ethan felt a shift. For the first time, he wasn't just reacting, was fighting. But Victor was steps ahead. That evening, a process server knocked on Lucas's door, delivering the restraining order. Ethan read it, his hands shaking. It claimed Lucas was a danger to him, citing fabricated incidents. The order demanded Lucas stay 500 feet away. "This is insane," Lucas said, pacing. "He can't do this." But Victor could, and he had. Ethan's phone rang, Victor's number. Against Lucas's protests, Ethan answered. "Drop this, Ethan," Victor said, his voice calm but lethal. "Or I'll make sure he loses everything." Ethan hung up, his heart racing. He looked at Lucas, whose face was a mix of fear and resolve. "We're not stopping," Lucas said. "He doesn't get to win." They contacted Mia again, sharing the restraining order. She promised to include it in the story, framing it as Victor's attempt to silence them. But the legal pressure was mounting, and Ethan knew Victor wouldn't stop. As night fell, they sat on Lucas's fire escape, the city sprawling below. "I'm scared," Ethan admitted. Lucas leaned against him. "Me too. But we're in this together." The stars above were faint, drowned by city lights. But Ethan felt a spark of hope. They'd fight, and they'd do it for each other. The restraining order was a shackle, but Ethan and Lucas refused to let it break them. They met in secret, in crowded subway stations and tucked-away diners, stealing moments while dodging Victor's surveillance. Ethan's world had shrunk to these fleeting encounters, each one a rebellion against his father's control. Mia's article was nearly ready, a bombshell that would expose Victor's tactics, the camera, the contract, the smear campaign against Lucas. She texted them a draft, and Ethan read it in a dimly lit diner, his heart pounding. It was raw, unflinching, and it named Victor Caldwell as a man who'd rather destroy his son than accept him. "This could ruin him," Ethan said, his voice low. Lucas nodded, but his eyes were wary. "Or it could make him come for us harder." Victor, meanwhile, was tightening his grip. He'd hired a PR firm to spin the narrative, painting Ethan as a confused young man led astray by a manipulative artist. The tabloids ate it up, and Ethan's phone buzzed with messages from old friends, colleagues, even distant relatives, all urging him to come to his senses. But Ethan wasn't confused. For the first time, he saw clearly his father's love was conditional, and he was done paying the price. Lucas suggested they go public themselves, not just through Mia's article, but on their own terms. "A video," he said, his artist's mind already envisioning it. "We tell the world who we are, what we're fighting for." Ethan hesitated. Going public meant no turning back. But Lucas's conviction was infectious. They borrowed a camera from a friend and set up in Lucas's apartment, the city skyline framed behind them. Ethan spoke first, his voice shaking but strong. "I'm Ethan Caldwell, and I'm in love with Lucas Harper. My father wants to erase that, but I won't let him." Lucas took over, his words fierce. "We're not a scandal. We're not a mistake. We're just two people trying to live." They posted the video online, and within hours, it spread like wildfire. Support poured in, messages from strangers, from queer communities, from people who'd faced their own battles with family. But so did the hate, venomous comments calling them sinners, opportunists, threats that made Ethan's blood run cold. Victor saw the video at a board meeting, his face a mask of fury. The board was rattled, stock prices were dipping. Investors were nervous. Victor's empire was built on trust, and Ethan's defiance was eroding it. He called his security chief. "Find out where they're hiding," he said, "and make sure that artist knows the consequences." The order was vague but chilling, and Victor's team knew better than to ask questions. Ethan and Lucas moved to a friend's loft in Queens, a temporary refuge. The loft was cramped, filled with secondhand furniture and the hum of the city outside, but it felt safe. They spent nights planning their next move, bolstered by the growing support online. Mia's article dropped the next day, a searing expose that detailed Victor's surveillance, the restraining order, and his attempts to control Ethan's life. The internet exploded. Hashtags like Free Ethan trending alongside calls for a boycott of Caldwell Tech. But Victor wasn't finished. He filed a lawsuit against Mia, claiming defamation, and sent cease and desist letters to platforms hosting the video. Ethan and Lucas felt the walls closing in, but they clung to each other. One night, as they lay in the loft's creaky bed, Lucas whispered, "If we lose everything, I'd still choose you." Ethan kissed him, the words a balm to his fraying nerves. "We won't lose," he said, though doubt gnawed at him. The next morning, a knock at the door shattered their fragile peace. It was a courier with a summons. Victor was suing Lucas for emotional distress caused to Ethan, a twisted legal maneuver to separate them. Ethan's hands shook as he read the papers, but Lucas's jaw set in defiance. "He's scared," Lucas said. "This is him lashing out." They called Mia, who connected them with a pro bono lawyer, Sarah, who specialized in queer rights. Sarah's voice was calm but fierce. "We'll fight this," she said, "but you need to be ready for what's coming." As they prepared for the legal battle, Ethan felt a shift. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore, was fighting for Lucas, for their love, for every kid who'd been told they didn't belong. The city outside roared with life, and Ethan knew they'd face it together, no matter the cost. The loft in Queens was a fortress, but Ethan felt the siege tightening. Victor's lawsuit against Lucas was a blade held to their throats, accusing Lucas of manipulating Ethan into rebellious behavior. The claim was absurd, but Victor's wealth and influence made it dangerous. Ethan and Lucas met with Sarah, their lawyer, in a cramped coffee shop, papers spread across the table like battle plans. Sarah's eyes scanned the summons. "This is intimidation," she said. "He's banking on you backing down." Ethan's stomach churned. Backing down meant betraying Lucas, betraying himself. "We won't," he said, glancing at Lucas, whose quiet nod was all the strength he needed. Sarah outlined their defense: countersue for invasion of privacy, using the camera as evidence, and leverage public support to pressure Victor. "The world's watching," she said. "That's your power." The online campaign grew, with activists rallying behind Ethan and Lucas. A local queer organization hosted a fundraiser, turning their story into a symbol of resistance. Ethan spoke at the event, his voice unsteady at first but growing stronger. "I spent my life hiding," he said, Lucas's hand in his. "But love isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to fight for." The crowd cheered, and for a moment, Ethan felt invincible. But Victor's shadow loomed. Victor, in his penthouse, watched the fundraiser livestream, his face unreadable. His board was fracturing. Some saw Ethan's rebellion as a PR disaster, others as a chance to modernize the company's image. Victor ignored them, focused on one goal: bringing Ethan back. He hired a private investigator to tail Lucas, digging for anything to discredit him further. The investigator's report landed on his desk. Lucas had a sealed juvenile record, a minor theft charge from his homeless days. Victor smiled. It was enough. The next day, A new article dropped. Leaked by Victor's team. Caldwell's lover has criminal past. Ethan and Lucas saw it while eating breakfast. The words like a punch to the gut. Lucas's face paled. I was a kid, he said. I stole food to survive. He's twisting it. Ethan grabbed his hand. He's desperate. We're getting to him. But the damage was done. Online support wavered. Some calling Lucas a gold digger. A con artist. Ethan's resolve hardened. Victor wanted a war. He'd get one. Sarah filed the countersuit, citing the illegal camera and Victor's coercive tactics. The media frenzy intensified, with news outlets picking sides. Ethan and Lucas stayed in the loft, avoiding the paparazzi swarming outside. One night, Lucas painted while Ethan watched, the brushstrokes a quiet defiance. I used to think art was my escape, Lucas said, his voice soft. Now it's us. Ethan kissed him, the canvas a riot of color mirroring their fight. Victor's next move was colder. He froze Ethan's bank accounts, cutting off his access to money. A letter arrived, hand-delivered, come home, or you're cut off for good. Ethan stared at it, the weight of his father's power crushing. Without funds, how could they fight? Lucas saw his despair and pulled him close. We'll find a way, he said. People believe in us. And they did. Donations poured in from supporters, enough to cover legal fees and rent. The queer community, strangers, even a few of Ethan's old classmates sent money. Messages. Hope. Sarah called with news. The court had expedited their case due to public interest. The hearing was in 2 weeks. Ethan and Lucas prepared, poring over evidence with Sarah screenshots of the camera feed, Victor's texts, the restraining order. But Victor was preparing too. He met with his legal team, plotting to portray Ethan as unstable, manipulated by Lucas. He didn't want to destroy his son. He told himself wanted to save him. But the line between love and control had blurred long ago. As the hearing loomed, Ethan and Lucas stole a moment in Central Park, their old sanctuary. The air was crisp, the leaves golden. What if we lose? Ethan asked, his voice small. Lucas stopped, turning to face him. We won't lose each other, he said. That's what matters. They kissed, the world fading, and Ethan knew Lucas was right. They were fighting for more than a courtroom victory. They were fighting for a future where love didn't have to hide. The courtroom was a battlefield, its polished wood and stern faces a stark contrast to the chaotic world outside. Ethan sat beside Lucas, their hands clasped under the table, as Sarah faced Victor's legal team. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, called the room to order. Ethan's heart pounded. This was their chance, but also their risk. Sarah opened with the camera, presenting evidence of Victor's illegal surveillance. She showed screenshots, Ethan's testimony, even the device itself, recovered from the penthouse. Victor Caldwell violated his son's privacy to control his identity, she said, her voice ringing. The gallery, packed with reporters and supporters, murmured. Victor's lawyer countered, painting Ethan as a troubled young man, misled by Lucas, whose criminal past proved his untrustworthiness. Ethan gripped Lucas's hand tighter, fury simmering. Lucas took the stand, his voice steady despite the scrutiny. He spoke of his life, his art, his love for Ethan. I never wanted his money, he said. I wanted him. The words hit Ethan like a wave, grounding him. When Ethan testified, he looked at his father, seated across the room, and spoke his truth. I spent my life trying to be what you wanted, he said. But I'm not your legacy. I'm my own person. Victor's face was stone, but Ethan saw a crack, something human, fleeting. The trial stretched over days, each one a test of endurance. Victor's team dug into Lucas's past, twisting his struggles into a narrative of deceit. Sarah fought back, calling witnesses friends, artists, even Mia, who vouched for Lucas's character and exposed Victor's tactics. The public was riveted, protests outside the courthouse growing louder. Free Ethan became a movement, with rainbow flags waving alongside signs demanding accountability. Victor, watching from his penthouse, felt the ground shifting. His stock was plummeting, his board openly questioning his leadership. He'd wanted to protect the Caldwell name, but it was crumbling under his own hands. Late one night, he rewatched Ethan's video, the one where he'd declared his love for Lucas. For the first time, Victor saw his son, not the heir, but the man. He shut the laptop, his chest tight. Had he been wrong? The final day of the trial arrived. Sarah's closing argument was fierce. This isn't just about a camera. It's about a father who'd rather destroy his son than accept him. Victor's lawyer leaned on the Caldwell legacy, arguing Ethan's actions threatened a company that employed thousands. The judge adjourned, promising a ruling soon. Ethan and Lucas left the courthouse, mobbed by supporters and cameras. They held hands, defiant, but fear lingered. What if they lost? That night, in the Queen's loft, Ethan couldn't sleep. Lucas, sensing his restlessness, pulled him to the fire escape. Whatever happens, Lucas said, we've already won. We're free. Ethan leaned into him, the city's hum a reminder of the world they were fighting for. But the next morning, a call from Sarah changed everything. Victor wants to settle, she said. He's offering to drop the lawsuit and the restraining order. But there's a catch. The catch was a meeting Victor, Ethan, and Lucas. No lawyers. No press. Ethan hesitated. It felt like another trap. But Lucas urged him to go. We need to face him, he said. Not just for us, but for everyone watching. They agreed, and Sarah arranged it for the next day at a neutral location, a quiet conference room in Midtown. Ethan's nerves were raw, but Lucas's hand in his was steady. When they walked in, Victor was alone, no longer the untouchable billionaire, but a man worn by his own choices. He looked at Ethan, then Lucas, and for the first time, didn't look away. I saw the video, Victor said, his voice low. I saw you. Ethan waited, braced for a fight, but Victor's next words stunned him. I don't understand it, but I don't want to lose you. The room was silent, the weight of years between them. Ethan didn't know if he could trust it, but for the first time, he saw his father not as a titan, but as a man who might learn to listen. The conference room was stark, its bare walls amplifying the tension between Ethan, Lucas, and Victor. Ethan sat across from his father, Lucas at his side, their hands clasped tightly. Victor's words, I don't want to lose you, hung in the air, fragile and unfamiliar. Ethan wanted to believe them, but trust was a currency his father had spent long ago. Why now? Ethan asked, his voice steady but edged with years of hurt. Victor leaned forward, his hands clasped, no longer the untouchable billionaire, but a man grappling with his own failures. I watched you in that courtroom, he said. You weren't afraid. I've never seen you like that. He glanced at Lucas, his expression unreadable. And I saw how he looks at you. I can't pretend I understand it, but I see it. Lucas spoke, his voice calm but firm. You heard him, Mr. Caldwell. You heard us. If this is real, it's not just about words. Victor nodded, a rare admission. I know. I'm trying. He slid a folder across the table, not a contract this time, but a letter. Ethan opened it, his breath catching. It was an apology, handwritten, addressed to both of them. Victor had withdrawn the lawsuit, the restraining order, and was stepping back from the smear campaign. I'm not good at this, Victor said. but I want to try. Ethan's eyes burned, the letter blurring. He'd spent his life craving his father's approval. But this acknowledgement, however imperfect, was something else. Lucas squeezed his hand, grounding him. What does this mean for us? Ethan asked. Victor exhaled. It means you're my son, no matter what. And I'll learn to live with that. The settlement wasn't a fairy tale. Victor didn't suddenly embrace their relationship, but he promised to stop fighting it. Ethan and Lucas left the meeting, the weight of the past lighter but still present. Outside, the city buzzed, oblivious to their quiet victory. They walked to Central Park, their sanctuary, and sat by the Bethesda fountain. Do you think he'll change? Ethan asked, his voice soft. Lucas shrugged, his smile wry. Maybe. But we don't need him to. We've got each other. The ruling came a week later. Victor's surveillance was deemed illegal, and Ethan and Lucas were awarded damages. They used the money to start a foundation, supporting queer youth facing family rejection. The tabloids moved on, but their story lingered, a beacon for others. Ethan and Lucas moved into a small apartment in Brooklyn, a space they built together, filled with Lucas's art and Ethan's dreams of a life unbound by his father's shadow. Months later, an invitation Ayurveda gala hosted by Caldwell Tech, the first under new leadership. Victor had stepped down as CEO, naming a successor who prioritized inclusivity. Ethan and Lucas attended, hand in hand, no longer hiding. Victor approached them, awkward but trying. I'm proud of you, he said to Ethan, the words clumsy but sincere. Ethan nodded, not ready to forgive but open to rebuilding. The gala ended with a surprise. Lucas, nervous but beaming, led Ethan to a quiet corner and dropped to one knee. I don't have a fortune, he said, holding a simple ring, but I have you. Marry me. Ethan's laugh was a sob, his yes immediate. The crowd around them cheered, a moment of joy that drowned out the past. Their wedding was small, held in Central Park under a canopy of stars. Friends, supporters, even Mia and Sarah were there, celebrating a love that had defied a billionaire's control. Victor attended, standing at the back, a silent figure learning to let go. As Ethan and Lucas exchanged vows, the city's lights shimmered, a testament to a love that had fought and won. Years later, Ethan would look back on the camera's red light, not as a betrayal, but as the spark that forced them to fight for their truth. They'd built a life not perfect, but theirs. And in every brushstroke of Lucas's art, in every step they took together, they carried a truth Victor could never erase. Love, in all its forms, was worth everything.